The notification came through at 3:47 hours, Pacific time. I had just finished reviewing intelligence briefings aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, somewhere in the vast darkness of the Pacific Ocean. My eyes burned from hours of classified reports, and I reached for my personal phone almost as an afterthought. My cousin Tamika had posted on Instagram. Just a casual story, the kind people share without thinking. But the image that filled my screen made my chest tighten in a way no enemy threat assessment ever had. There they were, all of them. 43 people packed into my father's living room, wearing matching Christmas sweaters with ridiculous reindeer patterns. My mother stood near the fireplace holding her famous sweet potato pie. Junior had his arm around his wife, both laughing at something my father was saying. Cassandra posed in the center like she had organized everything. Aunt Phyllis, Uncle Raymond, cousins I hadn't seen in years, children I had never met. The caption read, "Carter Family Christmas, 20 years of tradition going strong." I counted the faces 3 times, searching for evidence that I had been considered. An empty chair, a place setting, a single comment asking where I was, nothing. My absence wasn't mourned or acknowledged. It was as if I had never existed. The ship hummed beneath my feet. 7,000 miles from that living room, commanding operations that would never make the family newsletter. I stood surrounded by equipment worth millions, wearing a uniform decorated with ribbons representing 22 years of service, and I had never felt more alone. I called my mother. Christmas Eve, late evening in Virginia. I heard laughter in the background, glasses clinking, Marvin Gaye on the old stereo. "Denise, baby, is that you?" Surprise mixed with inconvenience. I recognized that tone. "Mama," I saw the pictures, the Christmas gathering. I wasn't invited. A pause. The background laughter seemed to grow louder. "Oh, honey, we thought you were too busy. You know how it is with your job. We didn't want to bother you." 20 years of excuses, and they still cut the same way. "You could have asked Mama." Before she could respond, I heard my father's voice, booming and impatient. "Who is that? Is that Denise? Give me the phone, Loretta." Shuffling, then his voice filled my ear, heavy with condescension. "Denise, calling to ruin another Christmas with your guilt trips." I just wanted to know why I wasn't told about the gathering, Daddy. He laughed, actually laughed. "You chose the ocean over us. Don't act surprised when we choose each other. You want to be part of this family? Come home, get a real job, help your brother with the dealership like you should have. Otherwise, don't call complaining about invitations you wouldn't accept anyway." The line went dead. I stood holding the phone, staring at dark water through the porthole. Behind me, footsteps. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo had entered for his shift, and I knew from his sudden pause that he had seen something on my face I hadn't meant to show. "Admiral, is everything all right, ma'am?" I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, composed my features into the mask I had perfected over 2 decades. "Everything is fine, Commander. Carry on." He nodded and moved to his station, but I caught the concern in his eyes. These officers, these sailors who served under my command, they saw me. They respected me. They would never treat me as invisible. I turned back to the porthole and watched moonlight scatter across the waves. They erased me for 20 years. I built an empire from their silence. The words formed with crystalline clarity. Not bitter, not angry, just true. Every forgotten birthday, every ignored accomplishment, every family photo I was never in. They had given me something more valuable than acceptance. They had given me freedom to become someone they never imagined. I returned to my quarters and did not cry. I had stopped crying over the Carter family long ago. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the next day's operations. There was work to be done. People counting on me. Real people who knew my name, my rank, and my worth. That was the last Christmas I reached out. The last time I waited hoping someone would remember. From that moment forward, I stopped hoping they would see me. I focused on becoming impossible to ignore. But that Christmas wasn't the beginning. It was simply the end of a pattern that had started 2 decades earlier, when I was 24 years old and foolish enough to believe that achievement would earn me a place at my father's table. I still remember my first deployment on the USS Nimitz like it was yesterday. I was a newly commissioned ensign, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, convinced this was the first step toward making my family proud. The night before I shipped out, I stood in my father's living room in my crisp new uniform, hoping for some sign of approval. He barely looked up from his newspaper. "You sure about this, Denise? It's not too late to come work at the dealership. Junior could use help in the finance department." "I'm sure, Daddy. This is what I want." He shrugged and turned the page. "Suit yourself. Just don't come crying when you realize you made a mistake." My birthday fell 3 weeks into that deployment. October 17th. I had mentioned it to my mother before leaving, casually dropping hints about care packages and cards, the way you do when you still believe your family thinks about you when you're not standing in front of them. The day came and went without a single call, no card waiting in the mail drop, no message passed through the ship's communication system, nothing. I told myself they were busy. I told myself the time difference made it complicated. I told myself all the lies children tell themselves when the truth is too painful to hold. When I finally got shore leave and called home, my mother sounded genuinely confused. "Was that last week, baby? I could have sworn your birthday was in November. You know how busy things get at the dealership this time of year." In the background, I heard my father coaching Junior on a sales pitch. I heard Cassandra complaining about her college roommate. I heard the sounds of a family continuing perfectly well without me. "It's okay, Mama. I just wanted to hear your voice." "That's sweet, honey. Oh, hold on, Hal. Junior's on the other line about the Henderson account. I have to go, baby. Call again soon." That was the first forgotten birthday. There would be 19 more. At 28, I was promoted to lieutenant commander, a significant achievement for someone my age, and I made the mistake of thinking it might finally capture my father's attention. I sent a formal announcement to the house, complete with a photo of me in my dress whites, my new insignia gleaming on my collar. I spent 20 minutes selecting the right frame, imagining my mother placing it on the mantel next to Junior's business awards. 3 weeks later, I called to ask if they had received it. "That's nice, Denise, real nice." My father was shuffling papers, barely listening. "Hey, did you hear Junior just opened the 3rd dealership? The boy's got a head for business, I tell you. He's going to make this family name mean something." I held the phone away from my ear and stared at the wall of my small officer's quarters. A lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, responsible for dozens of sailors and millions of dollars in equipment, and my father still measured success by how many cars my brother could sell. "That's great, Daddy. Tell Junior I said congratulations." "Will do. Listen, I gotta run. Good talk." He hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat there for a long time, looking at my own promotion photo on my desk. In it, I was smiling. I remembered feeling so proud when it was taken. Now the smile looked naive. The Thanksgivings blurred together after a while. I would find out about family gatherings through social media, through offhand comments from cousins, through the particular silence that falls when no one thinks to include you. My 31st birthday passed while I was stationed in San Diego, close enough to drive home for the weekend. I waited for an invitation that never came. When I called Cassandra to ask about the family's plans, she laughed nervously. "Oh, we're keeping it small this year. Just immediate family, you know. We didn't want to bother you since you're always so busy with your little boat thing." Little boat thing. I was the executive officer on a guided missile destroyer, responsible for 300 sailors and weapons systems capable of defending an entire carrier group. "Right," I said quietly. "My little boat thing." My father had a nickname for me by then. I learned about it from Aunt Phyllis during one of her rare moments of accidental honesty. She had called to ask about sending a package to my address, some old furniture my grandmother had left behind, and she let it slip while complaining about the family dynamics. "Well, you know how Hal is. He was just telling everyone at Easter that we shouldn't expect you to show up, called you the invisible daughter. Said you made yourself that way, choosing the Navy over your own blood." The invisible daughter. I thanked Aunt Phillies for the information and ended the call with perfect composure. Then I sat in my quarters for a long time, turning those words over in my mind. The invisible daughter. As if my absence from their gatherings was a choice I had made, rather than a door they had closed in my face. At 35, I was promoted to commander. The ceremony was covered by Navy Times and several local news stations. I sent invitations to my entire family, formal invitations, the kind with embossed lettering and RSVP cards. I reserved seats for them in the front row. I imagined, despite everything, that they might come. That seeing their daughter honored by the United States Navy might finally break through whatever wall my father had built around his heart. No one came. Not my mother. Not Junior or Cassandra. Not a single member of the Carter family. The seats I had reserved stayed empty throughout the ceremony. I delivered my acceptance speech to a room full of colleagues and mentors, people who had watched me rise through the ranks, and I did not let my voice waver when I glanced at those empty chairs. Afterward, my commanding officer, Admiral Morrison, put his hand on my shoulder. "Your family couldn't make it." "They had prior commitments," I said, the lie smooth on my tongue. He looked at me with something like understanding. "Sometimes the family we build matters more than the family we're born into. Remember that, Commander." I never forgot those words. My grandmother died when I was 38. Grandma Louise, the only person in the Carter family who had ever made me feel truly seen. She used to send me letters during my deployments, handwritten on lavender paper, telling me how proud she was of her granddaughter, the sailor. When I made lieutenant, she cried with joy over the phone. When I made commander, she asked me to explain every single ribbon on my uniform because she wanted to understand what each one meant. She had a stroke on a Tuesday in April. By the time the notification reached me through official Navy channels, because no one in my family thought to call, she had already been buried for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 14 days. 336 hours during which my grandmother lay in the ground while I went about my duties, completely unaware. I learned about her death from a casualty assistance officer who was confused about why I was being notified so late. The official report included details of the funeral service, the pallbearers, the hymns that were sung. Junior had given the eulogy. Cassandra had organized the reception. My father had selected the casket. And no one had called me. I flew home for the first time in years, not for a gathering or a holiday, but to visit her grave. I stood alone in the cemetery, in my service dress blues, and I talked to her headstone the way I used to talk to her over the phone. "I'm sorry I wasn't there, Grandma. I would have come. You know I would have come." By 40, I had stopped reaching out entirely. No more birthday calls that went to voicemail. No more Christmas cards that were never acknowledged. No more invitations to ceremonies I knew they would never attend. I built my life around the Navy, around the men and women who served alongside me, around the purpose I found in protecting a country that included a family who had forgotten I existed. I led humanitarian missions that saved thousands of lives. I commanded destroyers through crisis situations that would have broken lesser officers. I mentored hundreds of young sailors who trusted me with their careers and sometimes their lives. These people became my real family. When I made captain, my crew threw me a surprise party. When I was selected for admiral, my staff cried tears of genuine joy. The Navy saw me. The Navy knew my worth. The Navy celebrated who I had become. And the Carters, they continued pretending I didn't exist. They erased me for 20 years. And in that erasure, I found room to become something they never imagined possible. The call from the Pentagon came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office at Pearl Harbor, reviewing deployment schedules for the 7th Fleet, when my aide knocked on the door with an expression I had learned to recognize. Something significant was happening. "Admiral Carter, you have a call from the Secretary of the Navy's office. They say it's urgent." I picked up the secure line, expecting operational news. Instead, I heard the voice of Admiral Patricia Reeves, the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, a woman I had served under earlier in my career and who had become something of a mentor. "Denise, I wanted you to hear this from me before the official announcement. The president has approved your nomination. You're being promoted to vice admiral and given command of the Pacific Fleet. I sat very still in my chair, letting the words settle over me like morning fog over the harbor. Vice Admiral, I repeated. Pacific Fleet. First black woman to hold the position. First black female vice admiral in Navy history, in fact. You've earned this, Denise. Every bit of it. The press conference is scheduled for Thursday at the Pentagon. We're expecting significant media coverage. After we discussed the logistics and I thanked her for the call, I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Outside my window, I could see the USS Missouri Memorial in the distance, the battleship where World War II officially ended. I thought about all the officers who had served before me, all the barriers that had been broken, all the shoulders I was standing on. And then, unbidden, I thought about my father. I imagined calling him with the news, imagined his voice on the other end of the line, finally impressed, finally proud. For just a moment, I was 24 again, standing in his living room in my new uniform, hoping for a sign of approval that never came. I shook the thought away. I had stopped hoping for Harold Carter's approval a long time ago, but some wounds never fully heal, they just scar over. The press conference was everything Admiral Reeves had predicted. The Pentagon briefing room was packed with journalists, cameras, and military personnel. I stood at the podium in my dress whites, answering questions about my career, my goals for the Pacific Fleet, and the significance of being the first black woman in this position. Vice Admiral Carter, what message do you have for young black women who might be inspired by your achievement? I looked directly at the camera. I would tell them that excellence is its own answer. There will be people who underestimate you, who dismiss you, who try to make you invisible. Let your work speak for itself. Build something so undeniable that they cannot look away. The clip went viral within hours. By the end of the day, my face was on every major news network. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, CBS, they all ran segments on the historic appointment. My official Navy portrait appeared in newspapers across the country. The hashtag #AdmiralCarter trended on social media. And that's when my phone started ringing. The first call came from a number I didn't recognize, but the voicemail was from my mother. Denise, baby, it's Mama. I just saw you on the television. Oh my goodness, why didn't you tell us? We had no idea. Your father is so proud. Call us back, baby. We want to hear all about it. I listened to the message twice, marveling at the words. We had no idea. As if I hadn't sent announcements for every promotion. As if I hadn't invited them to every ceremony. As if my career had been some kind of secret rather than something they had deliberately ignored. The second call was from Junior. His voice was different than I remembered, smaller somehow, less certain. Hey sis, it's Harold. I mean Junior. Look, I saw the news and... Wow, Vice Admiral, that's really something. Give me a call when you get a chance, okay? We should catch up. The third call was from Cassandra, who had apparently been crying. Denise, I can't believe it. My sister is famous. I've been showing everyone at work. They can't believe we're related. Call me back, please. I miss you so much. I scrolled through my phone with growing disbelief. 47 missed calls, 89 text messages, all in the span of 24 hours. 20 years of silence, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk. My aide, Lieutenant Commander Simmons, appeared in my doorway. She was holding a tablet, looking both amused and concerned. Admiral, your family has been calling the Pentagon switchboard. Repeatedly. The communications office isn't sure what to do with them. My family, I said flatly. They're claiming they need to speak with you urgently. Something about a family dinner. I almost laughed, almost. Then the voicemail that broke something inside me arrived. My father's voice, booming and warm in a way I hadn't heard in decades. Denise, baby girl, it's your daddy. I just saw you on the news and I have to tell you I'm so proud of you. I always knew you had it in you. Always told everyone my daughter was going to do something special. Listen, we're having Sunday dinner this week and we need you there. The whole family wants to celebrate. Call me back, sweetheart. It's been too long. I played the message 3 times, letting the words wash over me. I always knew you had it in you. Always told everyone my daughter was going to do something special. Lies, every word a lie. I thought about the invisible daughter nickname. I thought about the empty chairs at my promotion ceremonies. I thought about learning of my grandmother's death 2 weeks after her burial. I thought about 20 years of forgotten birthdays, ignored achievements, and doors closed in my face. And now, suddenly, I was his baby girl again. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Not that day. Not the next. For 3 weeks, I let them call and text and leave increasingly desperate voicemails while I went about my duties, preparing for the transition to my new command. I read their messages the way I would read intelligence reports, with detachment, analyzing patterns. My mother's messages grew more pleading. Denise, please just let us know you're okay. We're worried about you. Junior's messages grew more casual, as if trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Hey, just checking in. Let me know if you want to grab lunch sometime. Cassandra's messages alternated between guilt trips and excitement. I don't understand why you won't call me back. Are you mad at us? Everyone keeps asking about you. My father's messages evolved from warmth to impatience to something that sounded almost like hurt. Denise, this is ridiculous. I'm your father. The least you can do is return my calls. I let them wait. I let them wonder. I let them experience a fraction of what I had felt for 2 decades. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning 3 weeks after the announcement, I made my decision. I picked up my phone and typed a single message to the family group chat, the one they had suddenly remembered to add me to after seeing my face on television. I'll come this Sunday, 4 p.m. The chat exploded within seconds. My mother, oh thank God, will make your favorite dinner. Cassandra, I'm so excited. I have so much to tell you. Junior, looking forward to it, sis. My father, that's my girl, can't wait to see you. I set down my phone and looked at my reflection in the window. 44 years old, Vice Admiral, Commander of the Pacific Fleet, the most decorated woman in naval history. If they wanted me now, they would see me as I truly was, not the invisible daughter they had erased from their lives, not the disappointment who had chosen the ocean over the family business. They wanted the Admiral. Fine, I would give them the Admiral. The week that followed was unlike any I had experienced in my naval career. I had planned amphibious assaults, coordinated multinational exercises, and prepared for hostile engagements. But preparing for Sunday dinner at my father's house required a different kind of strategy entirely. I called Lieutenant Commander Simmons into my office on Monday morning. She had been my aide for 3 years, and there was no one I trusted more with sensitive matters. I need you to coordinate something personal, I said. This Sunday, I'm visiting my family in Virginia. I want a full security detail. She raised an eyebrow but maintained her professional composure. Of course, Admiral. Standard protocol for a domestic visit would be. I don't want standard protocol. I leaned back in my chair. I want an honor guard, 6 personnel, Navy SEALs if possible, people I've served with directly, 2 vehicles with Navy insignia, full dress uniforms for everyone, including myself. Simmons was quiet for a moment. She knew enough about my family situation to understand this wasn't a typical homecoming. May I ask the purpose, ma'am? They want to see the Admiral, I said simply. I intend to show them exactly what that means. She nodded slowly. I'll make the arrangements. Should I coordinate with local law enforcement? Yes, standard notification for a flag officer visit. And contact the Navy Public Affairs Office. If any media inquiries come through about my whereabouts this weekend, they're authorized to confirm that Vice Admiral Carter is visiting family in Virginia. Her eyes widened slightly at that last instruction, but she recovered quickly. Understood, Admiral. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Ma'am, if I may speak freely, I think this is going to be something they'll never forget. I allowed myself a small smile. That's exactly the idea, Commander. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. I attended briefings, signed documents, and continued commanding the largest fleet in the United States Navy. But in quiet moments, I found myself questioning my motives. Part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl desperate for her father's approval, wondered if I was being petty, vindictive. Was this about showing them the truth or about making them feel small? I wrestled with that question during a late-night walk around the base, the Pacific stretching endlessly before me. And the answer I arrived at was this: it was both. Yes, there was something satisfying about the thought of my father's face when he saw the motorcade. But there was also something necessary. For 2 decades, my family had constructed a narrative in which I was the failure, the disappointment. They needed to see, with their own eyes, how wrong that narrative had always been. On Wednesday, Simmons confirmed my honor guard had been assembled. 6 Navy SEALs, all of whom had served under my command. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams from my staff during the Philippines humanitarian mission. Senior Chief Alina Rodriguez, whom I had mentored through a difficult period in her career. 4 others, each with their own stories, each with their own reasons for volunteering. They didn't hesitate, Simmons told me. When I explained the situation, every single one said they would be honored. Chief Williams actually said, "After everything the Admiral did for us, this is the least we can do." I sat with that for a moment. The empty chairs at my promotion ceremonies, the family who couldn't be bothered to attend. And here were 6 warriors who had dropped everything because I asked. "Tell them it means more than they know," I said quietly. On Friday, I visited the base uniform shop to ensure my dress whites were perfect. Every medal, every ribbon precisely placed. I stood before the full-length mirror as the petty officer made final adjustments, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. 3 silver stars on each shoulder. Rows of medals covering my chest, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit with 3 gold stars, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Humanitarian Service Medal, and dozens of others. Each one represented a moment of service, sacrifice, or leadership. Each one told a story my family had never bothered to hear. "You look magnificent, Admiral," the petty officer said quietly. "Thank you. I feel like I'm preparing for battle." She met my eyes in the mirror. "Some battles are fought with weapons, ma'am. Some are fought with presence." I flew to Virginia on Saturday with my security detail. We stayed at a hotel near my childhood home, and I spent the evening reviewing what I would say, how I would carry myself, what I would do if my father tried to embrace me as if the last 20 years had never happened. I also spent time looking through old photographs I had brought. My grandmother's funeral program, obtained months after the fact. My promotion announcements, each stamped with the date I had sent them. A birthday card from Grandma Louise, the last she ever sent, her shaky handwriting telling me how proud she was. These were my artifacts, my evidence, my proof that I had tried, year after year, to remain part of a family that wanted no part of me. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. I woke at 500 and went through my routine with military precision. Shower, hair styled in a neat bun, minimal makeup, uniform piece by piece, each element carefully inspected. At 1500 hours, I gathered my team in the hotel conference room. 6 SEALs in dress whites, standing at attention. 2 drivers in Navy uniforms. Simmons with her tablet, ready to coordinate. "Here's how this will work," I said, pacing before them. "We arrive at 1550 hours. Vehicles stop at the end of the street. Chief Williams approaches the front door and makes the formal announcement. The rest of you form an honor corridor from the vehicles to the house. I proceed last." "Understood, Admiral," Williams said. "What's our posture if family members approach before you exit?" "Respectful but formal. You're not there to socialize. You're there to honor your commanding officer. No small talk, no explanations, just presence." Rodriguez raised her hand. "Is there anything specific you want us to convey, ma'am?" I considered the question. Just be yourselves, be the Navy, be the people who showed up when my family never did. That will be message enough. At 1530, we loaded into the vehicles, 2 black SUVs with small Navy flags mounted on the front. As we pulled away from the hotel, I looked at the Virginia countryside and felt a strange peace settling over me. Whatever happened, I would face it with dignity and composure. The drive through my childhood neighborhood felt surreal. I recognized every house, every tree. This was where I had grown up, where I had dreamed of the ocean, where I had learned I would never be enough for the man who raised me. As we turned onto Maple Street, neighbors were already gathering on porches, drawn by official vehicles moving slowly down a residential road. A local news van was parked at the corner. I had authorized their presence, wanting witnesses to this moment. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. "Can't wait to see you, baby girl. Your mother made pot roast." Baby girl, as if the last 20 years had been erased. I didn't respond. At exactly 15:50 hours, the vehicles stopped at the end of my father's driveway. Through the tinted windows, I could see the house where I had grown up, the porch where I had sat as a teenager, dreaming of escape, the living room window where, 5 years ago, 43 family members had gathered without me. I straightened my uniform and looked at my reflection in the window. 3 stars, 22 years of service, a fleet of 200 ships waiting for my command. They erased me for 20 years. I built an empire from their silence. Now they'll see what silence built. I took a deep breath. Execute. The doors opened. Chief Williams emerged first, followed by the other SEALs. They moved with precision, forming 2 lines leading from my vehicle to the front porch. Neighbors gathered closer now, phones out, recording. Is that military? Look at those uniforms. Who lives there? The Carters. Williams approached the door and knocked 3 times, sharp, authoritative. I watched through the window as my father appeared, wearing khakis and a golf shirt, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. The news camera was rolling. The neighbors were watching. The SEALs stood at perfect attention. And then Williams spoke, his voice carrying across the quiet street with the authority of 2 centuries of naval tradition. Vice Admiral Denise Lorraine Carter, commander of the United States Pacific Fleet, arriving. I stepped out of the vehicle. The sunlight caught my metals as I emerged, sending small prisms of light scattering across the pavement. I stood for a moment beside the vehicle, letting the scene settle, the SEALs in their perfect formation, the neighbors with their phones raised, the news camera capturing everything. And my father, frozen on the porch, his mouth hanging open like a man who had just witnessed something impossible. I began to walk. Each step was measured, deliberate, the product of 22 years of military bearing. My shoes clicked against the asphalt with a rhythm that seemed to echo through the silent street. The SEALs remained at attention as I passed between them, their salutes crisp and unwavering. Behind my father, I could see movement in the doorway. My mother appeared first, her hand flying to her mouth. Then Junior, pushing past her to see what was happening, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like fear. Cassandra came last, nearly dropping the glass of wine she was holding. I reached the end of the honor corridor and stopped at the base of the porch steps. My father still hadn't moved. He was staring at my uniform, his eyes traveling across the medals, the ribbons, the 3 silver stars on each shoulder. I watched understanding dawn on his face, slow, painful, irreversible. "Denise," his voice came out as barely a whisper. What is all this?" "Hello, Daddy." My voice was calm, controlled. "You invited me to dinner, I'm here." He looked past me at the SEALs, at the vehicles, at the growing crowd of neighbors. "But the people, the cameras." "Standard protocol for a flag officer visit," I said. "Surely you knew that. After all, you've been telling everyone how proud you are of your daughter, the Admiral." The words hung in the air between us. My father's face reddened, and I could see him trying to process the situation, trying to find the angle that would let him maintain control of the narrative. It was what he had always done, reshape reality to suit his purposes. But this reality was too big, too public, too undeniable. My mother descended the porch steps, tears streaming down her face. "Denise, honey, you look. Oh my God, look at you." She reached out as if to touch my uniform, then pulled her hand back, suddenly uncertain. All those medals I didn't know. We didn't know. You would have known, I said quietly, if you had ever watched the ceremonies, if you had ever read the announcements, if you had ever asked. She flinched as if I had struck her. We wanted to come, baby. We always wanted to come. But your father said you preferred your Navy family, that you didn't want us there. That's enough, Loretta. My father had finally found his voice. He descended the steps, his chest puffed out, trying to project the authority he had always wielded in this family. Denise, this is a bit much, don't you think? Coming to a family dinner with an entourage, you always did have a flair for the dramatic. I met his eyes without blinking. 20 years, Daddy. 20 years of forgotten birthdays. 20 years of holidays I wasn't invited to. 20 years of achievements you never acknowledged. And now, because you saw my face on television, suddenly you remember you have a daughter. Now wait just a minute. I'm not finished. The command in my voice stopped him cold. It was the voice I used on flag bridges, in situation rooms, with admirals and generals and heads of state. It was not a voice that tolerated interruption. You called me the invisible daughter. You told people I had abandoned the family. You let me find out about Grandma Louise's death 2 weeks after her funeral. A murmur rippled through the watching neighbors. I saw phones adjusting angles, capturing every word. My father's eyes darted toward the news camera, and I watched him calculate the damage, realize that whatever he said next would be recorded, preserved, potentially broadcast. There were circumstances. He was stammering now, something I had never seen him do. The funeral happened so fast, and we didn't have your current number. You had my number. You had my email. You had the address of my command, which I sent to you every time I was reassigned. You chose not to use them. Junior stepped forward, his salesman's smile plastered across his face. Hey, sis, let's not do this out here, okay? Come inside. We're all family. We can talk about this privately. I turned to look at him. Privately? Like all those family gatherings you held privately. The ones I only found out about through other people's social media posts. His smile faltered. Look, I know things haven't been perfect, but... You called my career playing soldier, Junior. You laughed when Dad called me invisible. You sat in the living room last Christmas with 43 family members and never once thought to pick up the phone and invite your own sister. I didn't. We assumed you were busy. You assumed what was convenient to assume. You all did. Cassandra had made her way to the porch railing, still clutching her wine glass like a life preserver. Mascara-stained tears were running down her cheeks. Denise, why didn't you tell us about all this? She gestured vaguely at the honor guard, the medals, the stars. We would have been there. We would have supported you. I looked at my sister, the one who had excluded me from group chats by accident, who had organized family reunions without ever sending me an invitation, who had posted photos of gatherings I wasn't told about with captions like, "Nothing like family." I did tell you, Cassandra, every promotion, every ceremony, every achievement. I sent announcements, I made calls, I extended invitations. I paused, letting the words settle. You never came, not once in 20 years, and now you want to know why I didn't tell you. She shrank back as if my words were physical blows. The wine glass trembled in her hand. The street had grown completely silent. Even the children who had been playing in neighboring yards had stopped to watch. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on me, recording this moment, bearing witness to a reckoning 2 decades in the making. My father tried once more to regain control. All right, Denise, you've made your point. You've shown us all how successful you are. Congratulations. Now can we please go inside and have dinner like a normal family? I climbed the first step of the porch, bringing myself almost to eye level with him. This close, I could see the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. He had aged in the years since I had last seen him in person, but the arrogance was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the opportunity to reassert itself. A normal family, I repeated. You want to know what normal families do, Daddy? They remember birthdays. They show up for important moments. They don't erase their children because those children chose a different path than the one their father wanted. I never erased you. You're the one who left. You're the one who chose the Navy over us. I chose the Navy, yes, but I never stopped being your daughter. I never stopped wanting to be part of this family. You're the one who decided that my choice was a rejection. You're the one who punished me for 20 years because I didn't want to sell cars." His jaw tightened. "The dealership built this family. It paid for your education. It put a roof over your head, and you threw it all back in my face to go play sailor." There it was. After all these years, the truth finally spoken aloud. In Harold Carter's mind, my entire naval career, the lives I had saved, the missions I had commanded, the historic achievements I had earned, was nothing more than an extended tantrum against his authority. I took another step up, standing fully on the porch now, my medals gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Play sailor," I said softly. "Is that what you think I do? Let me tell you what playing sailor looks like, Daddy. It looks like commanding destroyers through hostile waters. It looks like coordinating the evacuation of 3,000 civilians during a typhoon. It looks like standing on the bridge of an aircraft carrier at 3 a.m, making decisions that affect the lives of 6,000 sailors. It looks like becoming the first Black woman in American history to hold this rank and this command." I gestured toward the SEALs still standing at attention behind me. "These men and women have served beside me. They've followed me into situations you can't imagine. They volunteered to be here today because they wanted to honor their commanding officer. That's what playing sailor looks like." My father had no response. For the first time in my memory, Harold Carter, SR, was completely, utterly speechless. Behind him, Aunt Phyllis had emerged from the house. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly, but something else as well. Perhaps a dawning recognition of all the family gatherings where she had laughed at her brother's jokes about his invisible daughter. "Well," she said faintly, "I suppose we should. The pot roast is getting cold." No one moved. I looked at my family, these people who shared my blood but had never shared my life. My mother weeping silently. My father diminished and confused. Junior calculating how to spin this story to his advantage. Cassandra mascara-streaked and trembling. Aunt Phyllis suddenly fascinated by her own shoes. And I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a profound, bone-deep weariness. I had spent 20 years hoping for their acceptance, then another 4 years building a life without it. And now, standing on this porch in my dress whites, surrounded by the evidence of everything I had accomplished, I realized that their opinion had never really mattered. Not in any way that counted. "The pot roast can wait," I said. "First, I want you all to understand something. I'm not here to gloat. I'm not here to make you feel small. I'm here because you invited me, and because after 20 years I decided you deserved to see the truth." I turned to look at the street. The neighbors, the news camera, the SEALs still holding their positions. "The truth is this. I am Vice Admiral Denise Lorraine Carter. I command the Pacific Fleet. I am responsible for over 200 ships and 140,000 sailors. I have served my country with honor for 22 years, and I did all of it while you pretended I didn't exist." I turned back to my father and held his gaze. "You called me the invisible daughter, but I was never invisible. You just refused to see me." The silence that followed stretched across the porch like a living thing. My father's face had gone through a remarkable transformation, from shock to embarrassment to something that looked almost like shame. Almost. Harold Carter, SR, had never been particularly good at shame. "Denise," he cleared his throat, attempting to reassemble his dignity. I think there's been some misunderstanding over the years. Communication problems, you know how families are." "I know how this family is," I replied. "I know exactly how this family is." He opened his arms, the gesture that had always preceded one of his performative displays of affection. The ones he saved for when there were witnesses. "Come on now, baby girl. Let's put all this behind us. There's my girl." "Don't." The single word stopped him mid-motion. His arms hung awkwardly in the air for a moment before dropping to his sides. "Don't call me baby girl. Don't pretend this is a happy reunion. And don't you dare try to hug me like the last 20 years didn't happen." My mother let out a small sob. "Denise, please, he's your father. Whatever happened in the past." "Whatever happened?" I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her step backward. "Mama, do you even know what happened? Do you know how many birthdays passed without a single phone call? Do you know how many times I called this house and got told you were too busy to talk? Do you know what it felt like to learn about Grandma Louise's death from a military casualty notification officer?" She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. "I didn't. Your father said you preferred to be alone. He said you told him you didn't want us interfering with your career." I looked at my father. "Is that what you told them?" He had the decency to look away. "I may have interpreted some things." Interpreted? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You interpreted my service to this country as a personal rejection. And then you spent 20 years poisoning my relationship with my own mother, with my brother and sister, with everyone in this family who might have actually wanted to stay connected." Junior had been edging toward the door, clearly hoping to escape the uncomfortable scene. I fixed him with a look that had stopped hostile foreign officers in their tracks. "Where are you going, Junior?" He froze. I thought maybe I'd check on the food." "Stay, you're part of this too." I watched him swallow hard and remain in place. "You told me once that playing soldier didn't count as a real career. Do you remember that?" His face reddened. "That was years ago. I didn't mean." "You meant every word. You meant it because that's what Daddy taught you to believe. That anything outside the dealership, outside his control, didn't count. Wasn't real, wasn't worthy of respect." I turned to include Cassandra in my gaze. She had finally set down her wine glass, her hands trembling too badly to hold it steady. "And you, Cassandra, do you remember the Christmas gathering 5 years ago? The one with 43 family members? The one where everyone wore matching sweaters?" She nodded miserably. I organized that one." "I know. I saw the Instagram photos while I was deployed in the Pacific. Thousands of miles from home, protecting your freedom to have family gatherings, and I found out about it through social media because no one thought to invite me. I thought, Daddy said you couldn't come anyway, so what was the point?" "The point was to be asked, Cassandra. The point was to be remembered, to be included even if I couldn't be there. But that never occurred to any of you, did it? It was just easier to pretend I didn't exist." Aunt Phyllis finally spoke up, her voice carrying that particular mix of defensiveness and false concern that I remembered so well. "Now, Denise, I'm sure we all feel terrible about any miscommunication, but you have to understand you were always so far away, and your father was only trying to." "Aunt Phyllis," I turned to face her, and she immediately fell silent. "You told me once that I wasn't marriage material because I couldn't even keep a family. Do you remember that?" Her face went pale. I don't recall." "I do. It was Thanksgiving 8 years ago. One of the rare occasions I was actually told about a family gathering. You said it at the dinner table in front of everyone. And no one said a word in my defense. Not my mother. Not my siblings. Certainly not my father." The memory was as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. I had sat at that table, in my service dress uniform, surrounded by family members who looked through me as if I were made of glass. Aunt Phyllis had made her comment while passing the cranberry sauce, casual as anything, and everyone had laughed. Everyone except me. "I left that night," I continued. "I drove back to base and volunteered for a deployment that wasn't mine. I spent that Christmas on a destroyer in the South China Sea, standing watch while you all ate leftovers and congratulated yourselves on being such a close family. The neighbors had grown even quieter, if that was possible. I could see Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down, the woman who had always been kind to me as a child, wiping tears from her eyes. Mr. Howard, who used to let me help him wash his car on summer Saturdays, was shaking his head slowly. They had all known. The whole neighborhood had watched the Carters for decades, had seen how my father treated me, had witnessed my slow erasure from family events. And none of them had ever said anything. But they were watching now. They were recording. They would remember this day. My father made one more attempt to salvage the situation. He drew himself up, squared his shoulders, and adopted the tone he used when closing difficult deals at the dealership. "All right, Denise, I hear you. I understand that you feel hurt. And maybe some mistakes were made on both sides." He held up his hand before I could respond. "But you're here now. You came back. That has to mean something, so let's start fresh. Clean slate. Come inside, have dinner with your family, and we'll figure out how to move forward." I studied him for a long moment. This was the man who had shaped my childhood, who had instilled in me both the drive to succeed and the knowledge that I would never succeed in his eyes. He had given me his stubbornness, his determination, his refusal to accept failure. And he had used those same qualities to shut me out for 2 decades. "A clean slate," I repeated. "You want to erase 20 years of neglect with a pot roast dinner and a family photo op. I want us to be a family again." "We were never the family I needed, Daddy. You made sure of that." I took a deep breath. "But I'll come inside, I'll eat dinner, because unlike you, I keep my commitments." I turned and signaled to Chief Williams. He approached the porch with crisp efficiency. "The honor guard can stand down, Chief. I'll be here for approximately 1 hour." "Understood, Admiral. We'll maintain position at the vehicles." "Thank you for everything today." He saluted smartly. "It was our honor, ma'am, truly." I returned the salute, then turned back to my family. They stood clustered together on the porch, united in their discomfort. A family that had always been so comfortable excluding me, now forced to confront the consequences of that exclusion. "Well," I said, gesturing toward the door, "the pot roast is getting cold." My mother was the first to move, scurrying toward the door with the desperate energy of someone who believes that food can fix anything. Cassandra followed, dabbing at her ruined makeup. Junior shuffled after them, careful not to meet my eyes. Aunt Phyllis bustled past with a muttered comment about setting an extra place, as if my arrival had been unexpected. My father and I were the last ones on the porch. He stood blocking the doorway, not quite ready to cede his territory. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly, gesturing toward the street. "The cameras, the soldiers, making a spectacle. They're sailors, not soldiers, Navy SEALs specifically. And yes, I did have to do this. Because for 20 years you controlled the narrative. You decided who I was and what I was worth. Today I'm taking that control back." He seemed to shrink slightly. "I never meant for things to go this far. I was just disappointed. When you turned down the dealership, it felt like you were rejecting everything I'd built." "I rejected working for you, Daddy, not loving you, but you couldn't see the difference." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or the distant memory of the father he might have been. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar stubbornness. "I suppose you expect an apology," he said. "I stopped expecting anything from you a long time ago. It's the only way I survived." I walked past him into the house, leaving him standing alone on the porch with the weight of his choices finally, publicly, undeniably visible. They erased me for 20 years. I built an empire from their silence, and this empire doesn't need their approval anymore. The dinner that followed was the most uncomfortable meal I had ever experienced, and I had once eaten field rations during a missile alert on a destroyer in contested waters. My mother had indeed prepared pot roast, my childhood favorite, though I suspected she had to ask Cassandra what that was. The table was set with the good china, the kind that only came out for holidays and special occasions. For 20 years, that china had been used at gatherings I wasn't invited to. Now it sat before me like evidence of everything I had missed. We ate mostly in silence. The clinking of silverware against plates was deafening. Occasionally, someone would attempt conversation, and it would die as quickly as it began. "The roast is delicious, Mama," Cassandra offered weakly. "Thank you, baby." My mother's voice was thin, stretched. She kept stealing glances at me as if afraid I might disappear or perhaps explode. Junior cleared his throat. "So, Denise, the Pacific Fleet, that's a lot of ships." 206, I replied, not looking up from my plate. "Plus submarines, and about 140,000 personnel. Wow, he nodded vigorously, as if this information was fascinating rather than terrifying to him. That's really something. The conversation died again. I ate slowly, methodically, tasting nothing. The food could have been cardboard for all I knew. I wasn't here for the meal. I was here to close a chapter, to put a period at the end of a sentence that had run on for far too long. Aunt Phyllis, perhaps emboldened by the wine she had been steadily consuming, finally broke the extended silence. You know, Denise, I always knew you'd do well for yourself. I told your father years ago, I said. Hal, that girl has something special. I set down my fork and looked at her, really looked at her. She wilted under my gaze like a flower in a drought. Did you, Aunt Phyllis? Did you really? My voice was calm, almost pleasant. Because what I remember you saying was that I wasn't marriage material, that I couldn't keep a family, that I was wasting my life on a dead-end job. She sputtered, that's not. You're taking things out of context. The context was Thanksgiving dinner. The context was you humiliating me in front of the entire family while everyone laughed. I picked up my fork again and speared a piece of carrot. But please, tell me more about how you always believed in me. The silence that followed was absolute. I stayed for exactly 47 minutes. I had decided on that number before arriving, 1 minute for each year of my life. 47 minutes to close out 47 years of hoping, wishing, and finally accepting that some families are bound by blood alone. When my time was up, I set my napkin on the table and stood. The scrape of my chair against the floor seemed unnaturally loud. Thank you for dinner, Mama. The pot roast was lovely. My mother's eyes filled with fresh tears. You're leaving, already? But we haven't even had dessert. I made your grandmother's pound cake. The mention of Grandma Louise sent a sharp pain through my chest. Of course she had made the pound cake. Of course she was using my grandmother's memory as a tool to keep me here longer. I appreciate the effort, I said, but I have an early flight tomorrow. Fleet business doesn't wait. I moved toward the door, and my family scrambled to follow. It was almost comical. These people who had spent 2 decades avoiding me were now desperate for a few more minutes of my time. Junior caught up to me first. Hey, sis, listen, I know things have been complicated, but maybe we could get lunch sometime. When you're in town, I'd love to hear more about everything. I studied his face. There was something there that might have been genuine interest. Or it might have been the calculation of a salesman who had just realized he had undervalued an asset. Maybe, I said, if you actually call. Cassandra was next, grabbing my arm with trembling fingers. Denise, please, I'm so sorry for everything. I should have done better. I should have stood up to Daddy. I should have. Yes, I said simply, you should have. She released my arm as if burned, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. My mother met me at the door, wringing her hands. Denise, baby, please, can't we start over? I know we can't change the past, but maybe the future could be different. I looked at this woman who had given me life, who had nursed me through childhood illnesses and braided my hair for school pictures. She had also stood by silently while her husband erased me from the family. She had chosen peace with him over a relationship with me. I don't know, Mama, I said honestly. I don't know if I have it in me to try again, but I won't close the door completely. If you want to reach out, if you want to actually know who I am now, not who you imagine me to be, I'll listen. But you have to be the one to make the effort. I've done all the reaching out I can do. She nodded, tears streaming. I understand, I'll call. I promise I'll call. I didn't tell her that I had heard that promise before. I stepped onto the porch and paused at the top of the steps. The seals had maintained their positions by the vehicles, and they straightened as I appeared. The neighbors were still watching, though the crowd had thinned. The news van was packing up its equipment. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps. My father. Denise, wait. I turned. He stood in the doorway, looking older than I had ever seen him. The arrogance that had defined him for as long as I could remember seemed diminished, though not gone. It would never be completely gone. I need to say something, he said, before you go. I waited. He stepped onto the porch, moving carefully as if the boards might give way beneath him. I'm not good at this, at admitting when I'm wrong. Your mother could tell you I've never been good at it. I know. He ran a hand over his face. When you left for the Navy, I thought you were making a mistake. I thought you'd fail, come home with your tail between your legs, and finally see that the dealership was where you belonged. And when that didn't happen, when you kept succeeding, kept rising, he shook his head. It was easier to pretend you didn't exist than to admit I had been wrong about you. I absorbed his words, turning them over in my mind. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from Harold Carter, SR. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. You asked me earlier when you'll see me again, I said. Here's my answer. When you learn to see me without the uniform. When you can look at me and see your daughter, not a vice admiral. Not a symbol of your failure to control me. Just Denise. And if I can, his voice was rough, if I learn to do that, then you have my number. I started down the steps. But I won't be waiting by the phone anymore, Daddy. I spent 20 years doing that. I'm done waiting. I walked toward the vehicles, my SEALs falling into formation around me. Chief Williams opened the SUV door, and I paused before getting in, taking one last look at the house where I had grown up. My family stood clustered on the porch, my mother weeping, Cassandra clinging to Junior, Aunt Phyllis hovering uncertainly in the background, and my father standing apart from them all, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Admiral, Williams said quietly, everything all right. I climbed into the vehicle and settled into the leather seat. Through the tinted window, I watched my family grow smaller as we pulled away. The house I had once called home shrank until it was just another structure on a tree-lined street. Senior Chief, I said, my voice steady. I spent 20 years hoping they'd remember my birthday. 20 years hoping for a phone call, an invitation, any sign that I mattered to them. He was quiet, waiting. Now I command a fleet that celebrates every day I'm alive. I have sailors and officers who would follow me into any battle. I have a family I built from scratch, people who chose me as much as I chose them. I turned away from the window. That's enough, I said softly, more to myself than to him. That's more than enough. The SUV carried me away from Maple Street, away from the Carter family home, away from a lifetime of seeking approval that was never going to come. Behind me, the sun was setting, painting the Virginia sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ahead of me, an aircraft carrier waited to take me back to Pearl Harbor, back to my command, back to the life I had built from nothing but determination and the silence of those who had underestimated me. They erased me for 20 years. I built an empire from their silence. And I was finally, completely, irrevocably free.